Reading from Interminable Wars and the Utopia Options. An essay from July 14, 2010. Economic reform is simple, political reform hard. Easy to repair the U.S. economy, not so easy to repair politics. The troubles with the U.S. economy should be reasonably easy to solve. Unfortunately, neither political party has an interest in fixing them. What would be required are independent selections for reduction and change of federal budget allocations, an increase of taxation, and changes in fundamental fairness principles for democratic restoration. Needless to say, no politicians that might run for the office of president in 2010 are independents with an able, competent grasp of the challenges the United States is experiencing. Neither major party offers competent political leaders as potential candidates either. The two incompetent nation-rebuilding foreign ventures must stop immediately if the nation's budget is expected to begin recovery. The military must be reduced in size, rebuilt, and readied for conventional wars should such ever arise. A Black Ops Special Forces Command with 100,000 soldiers should be created for temporary deployments to foreign emergencies. The Marines should be reduced in size and given Fort Richardson security against foreign terrorism should be increased with a better global human intelligence capability. A strong yet reserved military capable of deterring enemies is better than a sprawled, brawling military ineffectively seeking to establish foreign puppet governments for decades. Such protected military deployments with ludicrous emergency spending and non-competitive contracts, and even putting 250 soldiers' remains in a landfill, Air Force, to private firms have created trillions of new national debt and future obligations to veterans for health care, private armies of security forces at high pay, and have soaked up capital as loans to the U.S. government for decadent conflicts fought on credit. The plurality of the federal discretionary budget goes to the military. The majority of American workers produce nothing material. The financial sector alone is more than 30% of the employment in the United States of America. The economy is fundamentally sick and unrealistic, with tired Marxist rhetoric on a thesis-antithesis spiral of who is or against redistribution of wealth. Most of the wealth is redistributed to the wealthy from the poor and middle class. Wealth is about power and production nowadays more than accumulated material. What capital is was a political and economic philosophy question in the 20th century. Monetary theory itself evolved without a certain end, yet the nation has real geographic limits and real citizens with real needs. The needs of U.S. citizens for a good standard of living, a healthy ecosystem, and a renewable economic security within a political criterion of democracy and individual liberty requires the government function on a budget without end. That means protracted foreign wars that are not necessary should be stopped. Entitlements such as Social Security should be limited to those that actually need the money, as ought Medicaid to be. The middle class does not want to pay for a Social Security they cannot use themselves regardless of need. They want free entitlements, and that formula does not rationally work in the public sector for a number of reasons. The military has emerged as the basic tool to cut social spending through the diversion of tax money to fund importunate foreign engagements. Interest on the vast military debts will take up much of the future federal revenues. Instead of civilians on Social Security alone, they will share it with disabled soldiers, and the VA will have hundreds of thousands or millions to treat for decades from a variety of service-connected insults and injuries. The wars compound borrowing, grow to domestic capital that might have been invested in new businesses instead of U.S. bonds, failing to secure the Mexican border against illegal immigration, and failing to prevent those on visas from staying when they expire has allowed a vast foreign proletariat to become an internal proletariat agitating against U.S. border security and sovereignty. The wars drive up the price of oil globally, enriching the Muslim OPEC world in support for fundamentalist terrorism in Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. The economy of the former communist China is still growing as the United States leadership stupidly relies on it for much of American material articles and manufacturing. The wars have driven down labor wages and increased the cost of public education and medicine while lowering quality. A good, free public health care system for the poor would reduce the number of those using a more expensive Medicaid and Medicare while providing an alternative annex for the VA to use when during times of war and aftermath it has excess numbers of soldiers to treat. The nation's healthcare system is like its home mortgage system, becoming owned by global powers of concentrated wealth, and the prices of each are driven up as those vital areas are easy to lever toward extracting the most profit for the rich. Each field should be readjusted such that large corporations are preventing from owning either. quantitative trading and financial schemes also corrupt the mortgages market. The Twin Wars nation rebuilding fiascos were ill thought out by neocons and continued without a clear end or means to victory. The political reconstruction and actualization logic is deeply flawed. Pure military power to suppress local violence is all the present objectives of the U.S. government have actualized. The parameters were inconsistent with long-range goals for local self-determination. For a national democracy to work for the people in a post-wilderness era, the inherent opportunity for any individual to own a disproportionate percent of the nation's real estate or commercial wealth should be limited. To own too large a share of national economic opportunity diminishes the implicit democratic freedom of others in enslavement, as might have been Russian serfs brought up to date in a modern world. If the founders of the United States were redistributionists of the greatest scale in world history, modern Americans need not go that far. No estates of Lord Baltimore need be confiscated and redistributed to American farmers. Modern America need only restrict the number of corporations anyone may invest in to 3 and tax to extinction any amount of wealth greater than 500 times the national average annual income per individual. It does not matter what is done with previously accumulated wealth, burn it for that matter. What is important is that the economic field is a level one for all, and that corrupt network powers of organized wealth or socialist totalitarianism does not have monopolistic access over broadcast political power or economic opportunity. Even corporate oligarchy, they are individuals, is a dangerous and onerous fact of oppressive establishment. One must unwrap the economic space-time field of gravity created by established wealth that starves dissidents if possible, making an exclusive and compulsory political conformity to depravity, corruption, stupidity, and anti-religion requisites for acceptable corporate employment or civil existence. The United States can easily change its policies to enable swift movement toward a balanced budget to an energy infrastructure with superconducting electric power lines for electric cars so the batteries might be reduced in size as cars charges will drive along, while oil is phased out of transportation, for security on the borders, full employment, and an ecologically healthy future with competent leadership. Of course, does not and will not exist, and some atomic power plants may need to be built to provide electricity for automobile recharging. Democrats that might support environmental goals if given power will support corporate medicine and mandatory purchase of corporate health insurance. They will support the depravity of the homosexual cadre of military officers and defense secretaries and other offensive neo-Nazi movements. Republicans will moon the poor, yet in many ways have the same policy interests as the Democrats in support of global corporatism. The major difference is that the Republicans are unconscionable anti-environmentalists for cutting taxes and letting debt build because many of them collect interest on the debt. Regarding the consideration of free enterprise at a sublime level, the efficiency of capital is increased with thoughtful care in regard to its finite quantity and decreased with regard to its increase. When capital becomes abundant and concentrated, its most effective use tends to flow toward concentrating empirical wealth and power and commensurately decreasing empirical variety of capital development and ownership. Free enterprise may be existentially directed, impacted adversely with individual will applied to interfere with others, as well as through application of destructive rather than constructive abstract thought. Adam Smith was a friend and student of David Hume. Like the philosopher's criticisms of certain philosophies as abstract rubbish containing no references to real things, today global business advocates how much economic and value theory, philosophy, metaphysics that are immaterial abstract rubbish dedicated to conferring a narrow self-interest support to concentrating wealth. The goods of any society today may be produced through constructive thought and action simultaneous with non-adverse relations with others, and an abundance of good works in society, free enterprise and right government social supports were necessary always in a positive direction, including restoration of wild environmental health, and provide its own true social value system and rewards greater than possession of today's monetary balances, goods wherein an individual may profit while the nation's wealth declines. We may ask, inspired by Jesus Christ, what profit has a man if he gains a few $1 billion, but while his nation goes bankrupt and fellow citizens live in misery?